The phone unlocked itself at exactly midnight. I'd been sitting in the dark for hours, my back against the water-stained wall of the studio apartment that had become my entire world. The mattress beneath me was so thin I could feel every spring through the threadbare sheet. Outside, sirens wailed. Inside my stomach was a hollow ache I'd learned to ignore. The device had been dead in my hands for 3 months, a cruel joke from my dead husband, the only inheritance from 45 years of marriage. While my children divided a $50 million empire, I got a password-locked phone and 30 days to vacate my own home. But now on my 70th birthday, the screen blazed to life. The sudden brightness hurt my eyes. I nearly dropped it, my arthritic fingers struggling to maintain their grip. The phone began to ring an old-fashioned sound, the kind Arthur had programmed into all his devices because he said it reminded him of simpler times. My hands shook as I answered. "Happy birthday, my love." Arthur's voice filled the silence of my miserable apartment, as clear and warm as if he were sitting beside me. "You finally made it to 70. Now the real game begins." The phone slipped from my trembling fingers and hit the worn carpet with a dull thud. But his voice kept coming from the speaker, revealing secrets that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the true legacy he had built in the shadows. I scrambled to retrieve it, my knees protesting as they hit the floor. The recording continued, Arthur's familiar cadence washing over me like a wave. "If you're hearing this, it means my plan worked." What plan? My throat closed. Tears I'd thought were long dried up began to stream down my face. "But to understand how I got here," I whispered to the empty room to anyone who might be listening, "I have to go back 3 months to the exact day my perfect world crumbled like a sandcastle in the tide. Arthur died on a Tuesday afternoon, a massive heart attack in his office surrounded by architectural blueprints and unsigned contracts. He was 68 years old, but he worked like he was 30 18-hour days, a phone permanently attached to his ear coffee, instead of meals ambition, instead of rest. His secretary, Sarah Chen, found him slumped over the walnut desk I'd given him for our 20th anniversary. She told me later that she'd knocked 3 times before using her key. He was still warm when she touched his shoulder. Still looked like he might sit up and ask her to schedule another meeting. But he didn't. His heart had stopped beating 15 minutes before anyone opened that door. 15 minutes in which my husband died alone without my hand holding his, without my voice telling him I loved him one more time. That guilt ate at me more than the pain of his absence. I wasn't there because I was at the grocery store comparing prices on chicken breasts, using coupons clipped from the Sunday paper like I'd done for 45 years. I was being the good wife, the thrifty manager of our household, even though we had millions in the bank. Arthur always appreciated that I never became one of those women who spent money carelessly just because it was there. What a fool I'd been. The call came while I was in the checkout line. Sarah's voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Mrs. Morgan, you need to come to the office. It's Mr. Morgan. Please hurry." I abandoned my cart, $37.62 worth of carefully selected groceries, and drove downtown with my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. I ran 3 red lights. I didn't care. But by the time I burst through his office door, they'd already covered him with a sheet. I never got to say goodbye to his face. The funeral home wanted to know about the casket. "We have several options," the director said, his voice professionally sympathetic. "The mahogany is quite popular for distinguished gentlemen." "How much?" My voice sounded strange distant. $15,000 for the Brazilian model. $15,000 for a box that would go into the ground. Arthur would have hated the waste. But before I could say anything, my son Brandon was already pulling out his credit card. "We'll take it. Dad deserves the best." Deserves. Past tense. Present payment. The funeral was still 2 days away when Richard Evans, the family lawyer, called to schedule the will reading. "Is that really necessary right now?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. "Can't it wait until after we bury him?" "I'm afraid Mr. Morgan was quite specific about the timing, Mrs. Morgan. He wanted this handled immediately." Something in his tone made my stomach turn. The reading was held in Evans's 22nd floor office in the financial district, all glass and steel like a monument to success. The walls were pale cream, decorated with framed diplomas and photographs of Evans, shaking hands with politicians and businessmen whose names I should probably know, but didn't. The conference table was so polished I could see my reflection in it. I looked old, tired, small. Brandon sat at the head of the table as if he already owned the place. He was 42, but looked older, the same harsh lines forming around his mouth that his father had developed. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and checked his Rolex twice before Evans even began. Victoria, she went by Tori now, though I'd named her Victoria after my grandmother sat on Brandon's right. She was 38, beautiful in that cold, maintained way that required regular trips to expensive salons and dermatologists. She wore a black silk dress that whispered against the leather chair every time she moved. Her eyes were dry. They'd been dry since I called to tell her Arthur was gone. "I have a meeting at 3, she said, glancing at her phone. "Can we speed this along?" My youngest, James, sat on Brandon's left. 35 years old, and he'd never made a major decision without checking with his older siblings first. He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, his fingers drumming nervously on the table's glossy surface. I was at the end, the far end as distant from the lawyer as the room would allow, as if my presence were an uncomfortable detail no one wanted to face directly. Evans opened his briefcase, Italian leather, probably a gift from some grateful client, and extracted several documents. The sound of paper against paper filled the tense silence. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began to read in that monotone voice lawyers use to dehumanize even the most painful decisions. "I owe Arthur Morgan, being of sound mind and body, declare this document as my last will and testament." Each word fell like a drop of acid on my chest. "To my son, Brandon Morgan, I bequeath 40% of the shares of Morgan Properties, including all projects currently under development in California, Nevada, and Arizona." Brandon smiled. It was a predatory smile, the kind that made my stomach turn. The same smile he'd had as a little boy when he'd found money hidden in my purse. "To my daughter, Victoria Morgan, I bequeath 30% of the shares of Morgan Properties, along with the primary residence in Beverly Hills and all its contents." Tori simply nodded as if confirming a bank transaction. No emotion, no gratitude, just acknowledgement of acquisition. "To my son, James Morgan, I bequeath the remaining 20% of shares, plus the complete classic automobile collection and the vacation property in Cabo San Lucas." James exhaled, his shoulders dropping with relief. 35 years old and still acting like a child, hoping he hadn't been forgotten. 3 children. 90% of a $50 million empire divided among them, like pieces of a pie. I waited. My hands were sweating in my lap, leaving damp marks on my black dress, the same dress I'd worn to my mother's funeral 15 years ago, because I'd never needed another one. The silence stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. Evans turned the page. He avoided my gaze. "To my wife, Helen Morgan." The world stopped. I could hear my own heart pounding against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears. "I bequeath my personal cellular phone currently kept in the safe in my private office with specific instructions that it not be tampered with or forcibly accessed under any circumstances." Silence, then laughter. Brandon was the first. A dry, cruel laugh that bounced off the glass walls like stones. A phone. Dad had a sense of humor right to the very end. Tori covered her mouth, but her shoulders shook. Even James, my baby, the one I used to rock when he had nightmares about monsters under his bed, let out an uncomfortable chuckle. "He worked himself into a heart attack," Brandon said, wiping imaginary tears from his eyes. "And the only thing he leaves Mom is an old cell phone. This has to be some kind of mistake. This can't be right." Tori looked at Evans, her perfectly shaped eyebrows raised in disbelief. "Mom gets just a phone while we get the entire empire. That doesn't make sense." Evans maintained that neutral expression, lawyers perfect over years of practice. "The will is clear and was drafted by Mr. Morgan 3 weeks before his passing. It was verified by 3 independent witnesses and reviewed by a psychiatrist who certified Mr. Morgan's mental competency. There is no mistake. It's pathetic." Brandon leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. 45 years of marriage, and he leaves you a phone that probably doesn't even turn on. Something inside me broke in that moment. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was silent, like when a hairline crack appears in fine porcelain and you know it will never be whole again. "That's everything." My voice sounded strange, distant, as if it were coming from someone else's body. Evans nodded slowly. "There is one additional clause. Mrs. Morgan is permitted to remain in the Beverly Hills residence for 30 days to collect her personal belongings. After that period, the property transfers to Victoria Morgan, and Mrs. Morgan must vacate the premises. 30 days. 45 years reduced to 30 days' notice. We can speed that up, Tori said, already calculating on her phone. Mom doesn't need that much time or space. We can find you a nice little apartment somewhere affordable, Mom. Something reasonable. Reasonable. The word made me laugh, a bitter sound that surprised even me. Reasonable like giving up my architecture career to raise you. Reasonable like the nights I spent awake when you had the flu. Tori, reasonable like paying for your ballet lessons and your orthodontist and your college education. Reasonable like every birthday, every graduation, every sacrifice I made while your father built his empire. Don't be dramatic, Mom. Brandon was already packing papers into his briefcase. Dad made his decision. He obviously had his reasons. Maybe you should ask yourself what you did to deserve just a phone. Those words pierced me like a rusted knife, the kind that doesn't kill quickly, but leaves you bleeding slowly. Evans handed me a small key. For the safe in Mr. Morgan's private office. The phone is there. I took it. The metal was cold against my palm, surprisingly heavy for something so small. But in that moment, it felt like I was carrying the weight of my entire failed life. My children left that office arguing about numbers, percentages, expansion plans. Not one of them looked back at me. I stayed seated, staring at that tiny key, wondering how an entire life could fit into such a small. I went to retrieve the phone that same afternoon. Arthur's office was exactly as he'd left it the day he died. The blueprints still spread across the walnut desk plans for a mixed-use development in Phoenix that would now be Brandon's problem. A half-finished cup of coffee sat beside the computer mouse, a ring of dried liquid marking the wood. The scent of leather and pipe tobacco still clung to the burgundy curtains, even though Arthur had quit smoking 20 years ago. Everything was frozen in time, waiting for him to walk through the door, adjust his tie, and ask me what I was doing there, interrupting his work. But he never would again. The safe was built into the wall behind a painting, an abstract piece in orange and gray tones that I'd always hated. It's an investment, Helen, Arthur had said when he bought it for $12,000. This artist is going places. The artist had overdosed 3 years later. The painting was probably worthless now. I moved the heavy frame aside, my arms trembling with the effort. I wasn't as strong as I used to be. 70 wasn't old, but it wasn't young either, and the last few days had aged me years. I inserted the key into the lock. The mechanism made a soft, delicate click completely disproportionate to the weight of what I was about to discover. Inside was a single object, a cell phone. An old model, the kind no one used anymore, with a small screen and physical buttons that clicked when you pressed them. It looked ancient compared to the sleek smartphones everyone carried now. I lifted it out carefully as if it were a fragile relic or a bomb about to explode. The plastic was cold against my skin, heavier than I expected. I found the power button and pressed it. The screen flickered. The brand logo appeared, a company that had gone bankrupt 5 years ago. Then a background image loaded a photograph of us from our wedding day. I was 25 years old, wearing an ivory dress I'd sewn myself because we couldn't afford the ones in the bridal shop. Flowers in my hair, baby's breath, and roses from my mother's garden. I was smiling like the whole world belonged to me, like nothing bad could ever happen. Arthur stood beside me, so young, so full of dreams we didn't yet know would come true. His suit was borrowed from his brother. His shoes were the only new thing he owned, but his eyes were looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered in the entire universe. We looked happy. So stupidly, blindly happy. Then the lock screen appeared. Enter password. 6 empty circles waiting for numbers I didn't know. I tried the obvious combinations first, my fingers moving automatically. Our anniversary date, August 23rd, 79. Error. The screen shook, rejecting my attempt. His birthday, April 15th, 56. Error. Brandon's birthday, June 12th, 82. Error. Tori's March 9th, 86. Error. James's November 22nd, 89. Error. 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 After 10 failed attempts, a warning appeared in red letters. Too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 30 minutes. I sank into Arthur's leather chair, that enormous throne where he'd spent hours signing contracts and making decisions that moved millions of dollars around like chess pieces. It still smelled like him, like that expensive cologne mixed with the scent of old papers and ambition. I held the phone against my chest, and for the first time since his death, I truly fell apart. I didn't cry at the funeral. I didn't cry at the will reading. But there alone in his office, surrounded by his things with that stupid phone in my hands, I broke. The tears came hot and bitter, soaking through my cream-colored blouse. I cried for the 45 years. I cried for the woman I had been, the brilliant architect who'd given up her career to be a wife and mother. I cried for every family dinner where my children barely looked at me. I cried because my husband had died alone in this office, his heart exploding from pressure, and I wasn't there to hold his hand. And I cried because part of me was furious with him. Furious because he'd left me this humiliation, this cruel riddle. Why couldn't he have just left me something normal? Money, a property, a letter explaining why he hated me so much. But no, a locked phone. As if even after death, Arthur was still playing his games of control. The 30 days passed like water through my fingers, too fast and impossible to hold. Week 1, Brandon hired an appraiser to value the furniture. The man walked through my home, 45 years of memories, with a clipboard and a calculator reducing everything to numbers. The dining table solid oak seats 12, approximately $4,000. The crystal chandelier in the foyer, $8,000. The Persian rug in the living room, $12,000. I stood in the corner of my own house, watching a stranger put price tags on my life. Tori hired an interior designer. She brought the woman to the house while I was still living there, the two of them walking through rooms with fabric samples and paint chips, discussing renovation plans, as if I were already gone. "We'll tear out this wallpaper so dated. And these curtains, God, they're awful. The whole place needs to be gutted." The wallpaper had been my choice. I'd hung it myself, one painstaking strip at a time while pregnant with Brandon. James avoided me entirely. When we passed in the hallway, he looked at his shoes. Once I caught him taking photographs of the house with his phone. "Just memories, Mom," he mumbled, but we both knew he was documenting what would soon be his. The money Brandon had promised, $900 a month to help me get settled, arrived once. $600 with a handwritten note. "We feel you're spending too much. Being more careful with finances will be good practice." $600. For rent, food, utilities, medicine. My blood pressure medication cost $80 a month. I started skipping doses, taking one pill every other day instead of daily, trying to make the bottle last longer. I ate once a day. Bread from the discount supermarket, 50 cents a loaf. Sometimes a slice of cheese when it was on sale. The hunger became my constant companion, that dull ache in my stomach. I eventually learned to ignore. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. My clothes hung on my frame like I was a wire hanger draped in fabric. Week 2, Brandon came to my bedroom without knocking. I was sitting on the bed I'd shared with Arthur for 45 years, holding the phone, dried tears on my cheeks. "Still messing with that thing." His voice dripped with contempt. "Mom, it's pathetic. Dad probably left it there forgotten years ago and the lawyer thought it was important." "Your father never forgot anything." My voice was hoarse from crying in silence. "Whatever," he shrugged. "We need to talk about your situation. The 30 days are up in a week. Tori found an apartment for you." An apartment. Singular. As if I were just one person, not a woman who'd raised 3 children, not a wife who'd stood beside a man while he built an empire from nothing. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, kitchenette. It's small but adequate for your needs. My needs. "It's all you need, Mom. You're not going to have visitors. Your friends stopped calling years ago because you never had time for them, too busy being the perfect wife." The cruelty in his voice was like acid. "The apartment costs $900 a month. We'll cover the first 6 months. After that, you'll have to figure something out." I'm 67 years old. I haven't worked in 45 years. How am I supposed to figure something out? "Not my problem, Mom." He walked to the door, then turned back. "Dad made his decisions. Maybe you should have been a better wife." The door closed behind him, leaving those words embedded in my chest like shrapnel. Week 3. I tried the phone again, my fingers desperate over the numbers. There were almost no logical combinations left to try. My birthday, February 14th, 57. Error, the zip code of our first apartment, 90015. Error, the last 6 digits of Arthur's social security number. Error, too many incorrect attempts. Device will be locked for 30 days. 30 days, the same amount of time I had to leave my home. The phone shut down completely. The screen went black, dead unresponsive to any button. I shook it, desperate. I tried to turn it back on. Nothing. Arthur had left me an impossible puzzle, and now I couldn't even keep trying to solve it. Week 4. Moving day. Two men in gray uniforms arrived with a van. They packed my belongings into cardboard boxes without ceremony, without care. 45 years of life reduced to 8 boxes that fit in the back of an old truck. Clothes that no longer fit my shrinking frame. Some books, Tori said, had no value. Photographs no one else wanted, wedding pictures, baby pictures, family vacations to places that didn't exist anymore. Everything I'd kept, everything that mattered, filled 8 boxes. Tori personally supervised the packing to ensure I didn't take anything of value. She checked every box, every bag as if I were a thief in my own home. "It's just protocol, Mom. Don't take it personally." Don't take it personally. As if humiliation were optional, a choice I could simply decline. The men loaded the boxes and left. I stood in the empty foyer, the same foyer where I'd brought 3 babies home from the hospital, where I'd taken first day of school photos for 18 years, where Arthur had kissed me goodbye every morning for 45 years, and I felt nothing. Numbness had replaced pain. It was almost a relief. The apartment was exactly as Brandon had described it. A single room with beige walls marked by years of other people's lives. Nail holes, scuff marks, a water stain on the ceiling shaped like a question mark. One window looked out onto a narrow alley where garbage bins overflowed and pigeons fought over scraps. The bathroom was so small the toilet and shower barely fit, separated by less than a foot. The shower head dripped constantly, a rhythmic plink, plink, plink that would become the soundtrack of my new life. The kitchenette consisted of a 2-burner electric stove that took 20 minutes to boil water, and a refrigerator that made unsettling grinding noises every 20 minutes like it was digesting something it shouldn't have eaten. The men left the boxes stacked in the middle of the room and departed without a word. I sat on the thin mattress it came with, the rental sagging in the middle, springs poking through the fabric, and looked around at my new world. Arthur's phone was in my purse, still off, still locked, still mocking me. Outside the city lived its normal life. Cars honked, people laughed. Somewhere a dog barked. The world kept spinning while mine had stopped completely. I took out the phone and stared at the black screen. It reflected my face back at me, older, thinner, defeated. "What did you want me to find, Arthur?" I whispered to the dead device. "Why did you do this to me?" Silence was the only answer. That night, lying on the thin mattress that smelled of industrial cleaner and other people's sweat, I realized something I'd spent 70 years becoming invisible. 45 of those years erasing myself so others could shine. And now, alone in this terrible apartment with nothing but 8 boxes and a locked phone, I finally understood. Arthur hadn't forgotten me. He'd set me free. I just had to figure out how. The days in that apartment became a routine of survival and quiet desperation. Every morning I woke on that thin mattress, my back aching from springs that had given up their purpose years ago. The ceiling water stain greeted me like an old enemy, that question mark shape mocking me with its silent inquiry. What now? I'd lie there in the gray dawn light, filtering through the dirty window, listening to the building wake up around me. The couple above me always started their day with an argument. Her shrill voice, his defensive rumble words I couldn't make out, but tones I understood perfectly. They were young, probably in their 30s, still believing their problems could be solved by being louder than each other. The baby down the hall would start crying around 6. The mother's exhausted footsteps would shuffle past my door, and I'd hear her murmuring in Spanish soft words of comfort that transcended language. And I'd think I used to be that mother. I used to be the one pacing hallways at dawn, whispering promises to inconsolable babies. Where did that woman go? The refrigerator would make its grinding sound, reminding me it was time to get up to face another day of being nobody in a city full of somebodies. I rationed everything. The bread from the discount supermarket, 1 slice in the morning, dry, no butter. Butter was a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd chew slowly, making it last drinking water from the tap to fill my stomach. The water had a metallic taste like pennies, but it was free. Sometimes I'd splurge on a banana. 49 cents. I'd eat it in 3 parts, a third in the morning, a third at midday, a third at night. This made the day feel more structured, like I was still civilized, still human, still someone who ate meals at proper times. My medication, those small white pills for blood pressure, sat on the windowsill in their orange prescription bottle. I was supposed to take 1 daily. The bottle held 30. At $80 a refill, I couldn't afford to run out. So I took 1 every other day, sometimes every 3rd day. On the days without the medication, I'd feel it a pressure behind my eyes, a slight tremor in my hands, a whooshing sound in my ears like distant ocean waves. My mother had died of a stroke at 73. High blood pressure untreated. I was 67 playing Russian roulette with my own heart. The weight fell off me like I was shedding an old skin. 15 pounds in the first month. My wedding ring, worn for 45 years, became so loose I had to take it off before it slipped down the drain. I wrapped it in a tissue and put it in the drawer beside the bed next to Arthur's locked phone. 2 objects. 2 symbols of a life that seemed increasingly unreal. My clothes, the few decent things Tori had allowed me to keep, hung on my shrinking frame like costumes on a hanger. The cream blouse I'd worn to Arthur's funeral was so big now it looked like I was a child playing dress-up in her mother's closet. I tried to call my children. Not to beg, I still had some pride, but just to hear their voices, to remember I'd once been someone's mother. Brandon's number went straight to voicemail. I left 3 messages over 2 weeks. He never called back. Tori answered once, her voice distracted. "Mom, this isn't a good time. The contractor is here. We're gutting the kitchen, your old kitchen, and there's been an issue with the permits. Can I call you back?" She didn't call back. James was the only one who responded, but only with text messages. "Mom, I need space. What's happening is complicated for me too. Please understand. Space." He had a mansion in Cabo San Lucas, posting pictures on social media of infinity pools and sunset cocktails, and I had 200 square feet of desperation. I wanted to text back, "I understand perfectly. You got what you wanted and I'm what you discarded to get it." But I didn't, because somewhere deep inside, in a place I didn't like to examine too closely, I still hoped. Still believed that maybe somehow one of them would remember they'd once loved me. Hope, I was learning, was the cruelest emotion of all. I turned 67 on a Thursday. I woke knowing what day it was, feeling that small flutter of anticipation that never quite dies no matter how old you get. That childish hope that someone somewhere remembered you exist. I checked my phone, not Arthur's locked mystery, but my old flip phone, the one I'd had for years. The screen was small and scratched, but it worked. No messages. I waited. Surely by noon someone would remember. A text from James, maybe. He was the youngest, the one who'd been most attached to me as a child. He'd made me cards every birthday until he was 12, construction paper and crayon drawings, stick figures of us holding hands under a smiling sun. Noon came and went. I sat by the window looking down at the alley. A homeless man was going through the dumpster, pulling out a half-eaten sandwich, examining it in the sunlight before taking a bite. I watched him, wondering what the difference was between us. He lived on the street. I lived in a box above the street. He ate garbage. I ate discount bread. The gap between us seemed smaller every day. By evening, I accepted it. No one was calling. No one remembered. I was 67 years old, and I'd become so thoroughly erased that my own children had forgotten the day I was born. I opened my last can of soup chicken noodle store brand 49 cents and heated it on the electric stove. It took 15 minutes for the burner to get hot enough. I ate it slowly, sitting on the mattress, watching the light fade from my question mark ceiling. Happy birthday to me. That night I took out Arthur's phone. It had been locked for exactly 30 days since my last attempt. According to the warning message, it should unlock again. My hands trembled as I pressed the power button. Nothing. I pressed it again, harder. The screen flickered. The logo appeared. Then the wedding photo, that young, hopeful version of me staring out from 25-year-old eyes. And finally, enter password. The 6 empty circles appeared like little mouths hungry for the right combination of numbers. This time I was more strategic. I'd spent 30 days thinking, analyzing every significant moment of our life together. I had a mental list of everything I hadn't tried. I started carefully. The address of our first apartment, 15213. Error. The date, Arthur's company was incorporated August 15th, 85. Error. The number of his first property sale, the one that made him believe his American dream was possible, 285000. Too many digits. Stupid. I tried just the significant numbers. 285000 became 285. Error. Too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 30 minutes. I set the phone down and waited, counting seconds, counting my own heartbeats. 30 minutes felt like 30 years. When the phone unlocked for retry, I changed my strategy completely. I stopped thinking about happy moments. Arthur wasn't a sentimental man. He was pragmatic, tough-built by suffering. If he chose a password, it would mean something deep, something that shaped him. I tried the date his father died. Arthur had been 15, coming home from school to find his mother screaming in the kitchen, his father cold on the floor. heart attack, no insurance, no savings. That's when Arthur learned that poverty could kill you just as surely as disease. May 22nd, 71. Error, the date his mother was deported. She'd overstayed her visa by 3 years working 2 jobs to keep Arthur and his brother fed after their father died. Immigration caught her at a routine traffic stop. Arthur was 19, helpless to stop them from putting her on a plane back to a country she'd left 30 years before. August 14th, 75. Error, the date they almost lost everything, the first business, the one that nearly filed for bankruptcy. Arthur didn't sleep for 6 weeks straight, calling everyone he knew, begging for loans, for time, for mercy. November 9th, 87. Error, too many incorrect attempts. Try again in 60 minutes. I was getting desperate. Each failed attempt felt like Arthur laughing at me from beyond the grave. But I kept going because giving up would mean accepting that the phone was just a cruel joke, that my inheritance was truly nothing but humiliation. 2 hours later, I tried again. This time I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I just let my fingers move, guided by something deeper than memory instinct maybe, or the muscle memory of 45 years of knowing someone so intimately you share the same rhythms. August 23rd, 25. Our anniversary, August 23rd. And my age when we married, 25. The screen flickered. My heart stopped. The circles filled with green, one by one, like lights turning on in a dark house. The phone unlocked. The screen blazed with sudden brightness in the darkness of my apartment. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped it. After months of failed attempts, of accumulated frustration, of nights crying into my pillow, I'd finally broken through. The home screen appeared. No normal apps, no social media icons, no games, just 3 things in the center of a black background. A folder labeled, "For Helen." A calendar with 1 date marked in red, a voice recorder app. I stared at the screen, not daring to breathe. Not daring to hope. What had Arthur left here? Why all this mystery? Why torture me for months before revealing whatever this contained? My finger hovered over the folder. My pulse pounded in my ears so loudly I couldn't hear the couple arguing upstairs, couldn't hear the baby crying, couldn't hear anything but the rushing of my own blood. I touched the folder. It opened. 15 files, each one numbered. File 1, File 2, File 3. All the way to File 15. I opened the first one. A scanned document appeared. Legal looking. Official seals. Notarized signatures. I read the first line, and the world tilted on its axis. Property deed. Registered in the name of Helen Louise Morgan. An address in San Diego. A commercial building. 4 stories. Premium downtown location. My eyes scanned down the page, unable to process what I was seeing. Estimated value, $3,200,000. And it was in my name. Had been in my name for 8 years. My hands trembled so badly the phone shook. The text blurred. I blinked hard, clearing my vision, and read it again. Still there. Still real. Arthur's signature at the bottom, along with notary seals, dates everything official and legal. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a mistake. This was real. I opened File 2 with shaking fingers. Another property deed. An apartment complex in Portland. 24 rental units. Registered owner Helen Louise Morgan. Estimated value $2,800,000. File 3, an industrial warehouse in Las Vegas. $1,400,000. My name. File 4, a mixed-use development in Seattle. $4,100,000. My name. File 5, retail space in Sacramento. $2,200,000. My name. I kept opening files like a woman possessed, like someone frantically unwrapping presents on Christmas morning, each one more impossible than the last. Properties up and down the West Coast. Buildings I'd never seen. Land I didn't know existed. Investments generating income I'd never received. All registered in my name. All legitimate, legal, documented. When I finished reading the last file, File 15, a mixed commercial property in Reno worth $3,700,000, my hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down on the mattress. The numbers swam in my head. I tried to add them up, my brain struggling to work through the shock. $42 million. $42 million in properties I never knew existed. All legally mine. Hidden for years in records I never checked because I'd trusted Arthur implicitly to handle the finances. I was the wife. He was the businessman. That's how it worked. Except he'd been building me a secret empire while I clipped coupons and skipped meals. The walls of my miserable apartment seemed to close in. The air became thick, hard to breathe. I stood up quickly, needing space, needing air, needing reality to stop spinning like a carnival ride. $42 million, while my children fought over their $50 million, while they kicked me out of my home with $600 and a smug sense of superiority. I'd been sitting on $42 million I didn't even know about. And according to the documents, all these properties were generating income. Rents, profits, money that had been flowing into a bank account I didn't know I had. I sat back down heavily, the springs in the mattress groaning in protest. Arthur had left me a fortune, a secret hidden fortune. But why? Why not just tell me while he was alive? Why the locked phone? Why the torture? I looked at the other two icons on the screen, the calendar and the voice recorder. My finger hovered between them, torn. I touched the calendar first. It opened to show a single marked day, October 18th, 3 weeks away, my 70th birthday. There was a note attached, written in Arthur's precise, no-nonsense style. Everything will be revealed on this date. Wait, my love. Wait. Wait. After months of suffering, after being humiliated and discarded, after eating 1 meal a day and rationing medication, he wanted me to wait 3 more weeks. Fury flared in my chest, hot and bright. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, watch it shatter, destroy this game Arthur was playing from beyond the grave. But the third icon caught my eye. The voice recorder. 1 file saved. Duration 43 minutes, 17 seconds. Recording date, 2 weeks before Arthur died. 2 weeks before his heart had exploded in that office surrounded by blueprints and unfulfilled contracts. My finger trembled over the play button. Part of me wanted to press it immediately to hear his voice, to understand. But another part was terrified, a deep primal fear of what that recording might contain. The tears started before I could stop them. Not tears of sadness. Tears of confusion, anger, relief, 1,000 contradictory emotions hitting me at once like waves battering ashore. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered to the phone, to Arthur, to the universe. Why did you let me suffer? But I knew Arthur. 45 years of marriage taught me how he thought, how he planned. Every move he made had 10 calculated steps ahead. This wasn't pointless cruelty. This was a test, or a lesson, or both. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, took a deep breath, and pressed play. Static, then a throat clearing, then his voice as clear and present as if he were sitting beside me on this terrible mattress. Hello, Helen. My breath caught. If you're listening to this, it means I managed to keep this plan secret until the end. It means I died without telling you anything, and it means you've been through the hell I designed specifically for you. His tone was calm, matter of fact, like when he explained business contracts or financial strategies. I know you're furious with me right now. You have every right to be. I left you a locked phone while our children got everything visible. I made you look like the fool, the forgotten one, the one who was worthless. A pause. His breathing was heavy, labored. I remembered that sound, the way he'd breathe when he was trying to control strong emotions. And worse, I let them humiliate you. I let them kick you out of your own home. I let you go hungry and cold in some horrible place because I know you, Helen. I know that's exactly where you ended up. How did he know? How could he have predicted this so perfectly? I'm sorry, my love. I'm sorry for every second of pain I caused you, but I needed it to happen exactly like this. My hand covered my mouth. The tears were falling silently now, dripping off my chin onto my lap. I needed our children to show who they truly are when they think they've won everything. I needed the world to see them without their masks, and more importantly, I needed you to see yourself without me. The recording continued, Arthur's voice filling my small, terrible apartment with words that were breaking me apart and putting me back together simultaneously. For 45 years, you were my wife, my partner, the mother of my children. But somewhere along the way, you forgot who you were before all of that. You forgot the brilliant architect, the woman with her own dreams, the person who existed independently of me. His voice cracked slightly. You became my shadow, and I allowed it because it was easier for me, more convenient. I needed you to run the house, raise the kids, be the support system so I could build my empire. And you did it perfectly. You erased yourself so completely that even you forgot Helen the architect ever existed. I was sobbing now, clutching the phone with both hands. This phone isn't just an inheritance, Helen. It's your liberation. The documents you found are real. The money is yours. It always was. I built that parallel empire using your name because I knew that one day when I was gone, you would need to be independent. You would need to stand on your own. I knew our children would become greedy monsters. I watched them grow up, and I refused to see it clearly until it was too late. That was my greatest failure as a father. I gave them too much too easily. I taught them that money equals power, but I never taught them compassion, humility, or the value of hard work. The recording went on. In 3 weeks, you'll turn 70. On that day, this phone will unlock the rest of the plan. But for now, I want you to know something important. A long pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering strength. You are not alone. You never were. And what comes next will change everything. Static. End of recording. I sat in the darkness, the phone still in my hands, processing every word. Arthur hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't abandoned me. He'd set me free in the only way he knew how, by breaking me down completely, so I could rebuild myself from scratch. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat on that thin mattress, replaying Arthur's recording over and over until I'd memorized every word, every pause, every breath. His voice filled the empty apartment, making it feel less lonely, less like a prison. But questions still swirled in my mind like water going down a drain. What else had he planned? What would happen on my 70th birthday? He'd already given me the property's $42 million worth. What else could there be? And what did he mean? You are not alone, you never were. I was completely alone. My children had abandoned me. I had no friends left. I'd neglected them for years, choosing family duty over friendship. I had nobody. Unless Arthur had left something else. Someone else. As dawn light crept through my dirty window, turning the alley from black to gray, I picked up the phone again. I checked every icon, every corner of the screen, looking for something I'd missed. And then I saw it. In the bottom right corner, almost invisible against the black background, a tiny contacts icon. How had I missed it before I opened it with trembling fingers? One contact, a single phone number, no name, just digits with a California area code. My heart pounded. Who was this person? Why had Arthur left only one contact? Should I call? What if it was a mistake? What if I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it? The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. I was about to hang up when a voice answered. Hello, Helen. A man's voice. Older, warm, kind. I've been waiting for your call. My voice stuck in my throat. Who is this? My name is Thomas Wright. I was Arthur's best friend for 40 years. I'm also his personal attorney, different from Richard Evans, who handles the corporate affairs. Thomas Wright. The name meant nothing to me. In 45 years of marriage, Arthur had never mentioned him. How did you know it was me? This number only exists on that phone, and that phone only has one contact. When it rings, it can only be you. A gentle chuckle. Arthur was very thorough in his planning. I didn't know what to say. My mind was still reeling from the properties from the recording, and now this stranger who knew my name, who'd been waiting for my call. I know this must be overwhelming, Thomas continued. His voice reminded me of warm, honey-sweet, but substantive. Arthur told me everything about his plan. At first, I thought he was crazy. I told him it was too cruel making you suffer like this. But he insisted it was the only way. The only way for what? For you to wake up, to remember who you were before you became someone's wife, someone's mother, before you became invisible. Those words hit me like a physical blow. Invisible. That's exactly what I'd become. You found the property documents? Thomas asked. Yes. My voice was barely a whisper. I still can't believe they're real. They're completely real and legal. Every one of those properties has been generating income for years. The money has been accumulating in a special account in your name, an account you didn't know existed. How much? Currently, there's approximately $6,300,000 in available cash in addition to the value of the properties themselves. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. $6 million in cash. While I was about to be evicted for not being able to pay $1,800, while I was skipping medication and eating 1 meal a day, while my children sent me $600 with a note saying I spent too much. Why? The word came out as a sob. Why didn't Arthur tell me anything? Why did he let me suffer like this? Thomas's voice became even gentler. Because he knew you better than anyone, Helen. He knew that if he told you while he was alive, you would have insisted that money be used for the children, for the family, for anyone but yourself. You've spent your entire life putting yourself last. Arthur said it was your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. He was right. Thomas was completely right. If Arthur had told me about this secret empire, I would have immediately wanted it to go to Brandon, to Tori, to James. I would have found 1,000 reasons why they needed it more than I did. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, feeling lost. For now, nothing. Arthur was very specific about that. He wants you to wait until your birthday. Everything will be fully revealed then. There's more than what you've seen so far. More boom? What more could there be? I can't tell you. Arthur made me swear not to interfere with his plan, but I can help you with your immediate situation. His tone became businesslike. I understand you're about to be evicted. Tomorrow, I admitted, if I don't pay the back rent, $1,800. That's not going to happen. I'm transferring $10,000 to you tonight. You'll have it by morning. Use it to pay the rent and have something to live on until your birthday. $10,000. I could eat. I could afford medication. I could breathe. The money is coming from your own account, Thomas emphasized. It's not charity, it's yours. You've earned it just by being who you are. I didn't know what to say. Thank you seemed inadequate. Don't thank me, thank Arthur. He set all this up because he loved you more than you knew. A pause. One more thing, Helen. Your children know nothing about this. Richard Evans doesn't either. Arthur compartmentalized everything so no one could ruin the plan. When your birthday arrives, everyone is going to be in for quite a surprise. Especially my children. Especially them. I could hear the smile in his voice. Take care, Helen. And don't hesitate to call if you need anything. That number will always be available for you. The call ended. I sat there holding the phone, processing everything. Arthur had planned this with surgical precision. Every detail, every moment of suffering had a purpose. And although part of me was still furious with him for putting me through this, another part was beginning to understand. He'd set me free. The money arrived at 11:47 p.m. I was lying awake. I seemed to do that a lot now when my phone buzzed with a bank notification. I'd signed up for text alerts years ago when I still had access to our joint account back when I was a person who had money to monitor. Deposit received $10,000. I stared at those numbers until my eyes blurred with tears. $10,000. I could eat. I could take my medication every day like I was supposed to. I could buy soap that didn't come from the dollar store. I could get my hair cut. I could feel human again. I didn't sleep at all that night. I was too afraid that if I closed my eyes, I'd wake up and it would all be a dream. The unlocked phone, the properties Thomas Wright, the money. But morning came and the bank notification was still there. Real, actual, mine. At 9 a.m., I withdrew $2,000 in cash from the ATM 3 blocks away. The machine counted out the bills with mechanical precision, and I stood there watching, half expecting it to stop and display an error message. But it didn't. The money came out. I took it, folded it carefully into my purse, and walked straight to the landlord's office. Robert Miller's office was on the first floor of my building, a cramped room that smelled like cigarette smoke and old coffee. He was sitting behind a desk covered in papers, folders, and what looked like betting slips from the racetrack. He looked up when I entered, his expression shifting from surprise to suspicion. Mrs. Morgan. He leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. You got my final notice? I did. I placed an envelope on his desk. Inside was $2,000 in cash. Here's the back rent plus next month. All in cash. He opened the envelope, slowly counted the money twice, looking at me like I'd robbed a bank. Where'd you get this? That's not your concern, Mr. Miller. Do we have a problem? He blinked. I'd never spoken to him like that before, with confidence, with authority. I'd always been apologetic, pleading desperate. No problem. We're settled. Good. I walked out of that office with my head held high. For the first time in months, I didn't have to beg. I didn't have to humiliate myself. I had money. I had power. Even though I still lived in that terrible apartment, even though I still wore clothes that hung loose on my frame, something fundamental had changed inside me. A spark, small but bright, growing. 10 days before my 70th birthday, Richard Evans called. I was sitting by the window actually eating a proper lunch, a sandwich with turkey and lettuce and tomato real food, when my phone rang. Mrs. Morgan, I need to see you. It's urgent. The tone in his voice made my stomach tighten. What's this about? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 2 p.m.? I hadn't been back to that building since the will reading. The thought of returning made my skin crawl, but something in Evan's voice told me this wasn't optional. I'll be there. The next day I dressed carefully. I'd used some of the money Thomas transferred to buy a new outfit, nothing expensive but clean respectable. A dark gray dress that actually fit my smaller frame. Shoes that didn't have worn heels. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone different from the broken woman who'd left that office 3 months ago. I was still thin, still tired, but there was something in my eyes now. Determination. Strength. The receptionist who'd ignored me last time actually stood up when I entered. Mrs. Morgan, Mr. Evans is expecting you. Please go right up. Something had changed. I took the elevator to the 22nd floor, my heart pounding with each ascending number. When the doors opened and I walked toward the conference room, I could hear voices inside. Familiar voices. Brandon. Tori. James. All 3 of my children were already there. I paused outside the door, gathering my courage. Then I walked in. They all turned to look at me, and their expressions were nothing like I'd seen before. No contempt, no indifference, fear, worry, guilt. Mom, Brandon stood up. He looked terrible, his face gaunt, his expensive suit hanging differently than before. Thanks for coming. Tori's eyes were red like she'd been crying. Her perfect makeup couldn't quite hide it. James couldn't meet my eyes. Richard Evans gestured to a chair. Please, Mrs. Morgan, sit. I sat on the opposite side of the table from my children, the same dynamic as before, but everything felt different. Evans opened a folder. Mrs. Morgan, I've called you here because a complicated situation has arisen. Over the past few weeks, we've been conducting a thorough audit of Morgan Properties as part of the transition process. He paused, looking uncomfortable. And we've discovered certain irregularities. Irregularities? I kept my voice neutral. Debts, Brandon said bluntly. His voice was hoarse. Massive debts that Dad hid in the corporate structure. Loans with crushing interest rates. Projects that are hemorrhaging money. Contracts with penalty clauses that are destroying us. Tori's voice shook when she spoke. We're in serious trouble, Mom. The company we thought was worth $50 million actually owes nearly $40 million. We're on the verge of bankruptcy. The silence that followed was heavy. I processed this information carefully, my mind working. Arthur had done this. He'd structured his visible empire as a trap, a beautiful golden trap that was now closing around my children. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Evans cleared his throat. Because legally you're still part of the Morgan family, and there may be certain assets in your name that could help resolve this crisis. There it was, the real reason for this meeting. They were desperate, and they thought I might have something of value hidden somewhere. I have nothing, I said simply. You were all there when the will was read. I received a phone, that's all. That phone. Brandon leaned forward. Did you manage to unlock it? My mind worked quickly. I could lie, I could say no. But something in me wanted to see how far they would go, wanted to test if there was any spark of real humanity left, or if this was all just financial panic disguised as family concern. Yes, I unlocked it. All 3 of them tensed visibly. Even Evans leaned forward. And what was inside? Tori asked, her voice almost desperate. Old photographs, voicemails, memories. I wasn't entirely lying. Those things were there too. Nothing of monetary value. The disappointment on their faces was palpable, almost painful to watch. Brandon slumped back in his chair. This is a disaster. Dad left us a rotten empire. Why would he do something like that? Because he wanted to teach you a lesson, I thought. Because you became exactly the kind of people he despised. But I didn't say it. I just sat there watching them fall apart. Tori started crying real tears this time, not the delicate kind for show. I'm going to lose the mansion. The designer already spent $200,000 on renovations, and I can't pay him. He's threatening to sue. James spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. I sold 2 of the classic cars for way below value because I needed cash fast. Now I find out those cars were used as collateral for a loan. I'm facing legal action. I observed all three of them, my children, the people I'd grown up loving more than my own life, and felt nothing. Not joy at their suffering, but not compassion either. Just an empty space where unconditional maternal love used to be. "I'm sorry for you," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry they'd reached this point. Sorry Arthur had to teach them this way, but I also understood why. "Could you talk to Evans?" Brandon's voice had an edge of pleading I'd never heard before. "See if there's any way to reclaim part of the inheritance, something Dad might have overlooked. After 45 years of marriage, your father left me a phone. Do you really think he overlooked anything?" The irony hung in the air like smoke. "You were his wife," Tori said desperately, "and we're his children. If he wanted to punish you with nothing, what makes you think he didn't want to punish us with debt?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Evans coughed nervously. "There is another option. You could file for corporate bankruptcy. You'd lose the company, the properties, everything. But you could start over." "Start over with what?" Tori almost shouted. "We have nothing without Dad's money. None of us has ever really worked in our lives." There it was, the naked, ugly truth. My children were parasites. Beautiful, educated, well-dressed parasites who'd never learned to build anything for themselves. I stood up. "If there's nothing else, I'd like to leave." "Mom, wait." James stood too. For the first time in months, he looked directly at me. Really looked. "I'm sorry. For everything. For how we treated you. For kicking you out of the house. For abandoning you. For all of it." An apology. Finally. But it came too late. It came only when they needed something. It wasn't genuine. It was convenient. "Thank you, James." My voice was gentle but firm. "I hope you find a solution to your problems." I walked out of that office, leaving them in their desperation. And for the first time in 70 years, I felt powerful. 7 days before my 70th birthday, Thomas Wright called again. "Helen, I need you to come to my office on your birthday. 9 a.m. sharp." "What's going to happen?" "Everything will be revealed." Arthur left very specific instructions. "I've also invited your children and Richard Evans. Everyone needs to be present." My stomach clenched. "Do they know what the meeting is about?" "They only know it's about pending matters of Arthur's estate. They have no idea what's really coming." His voice softened. "Helen, prepare yourself. What's about to happen will change everything, not just for you, but for everyone." The final week passed in a strange haze. I cleaned my apartment obsessively. I reread the property documents. I listened to Arthur's recording so many times I could recite it from memory. I bought a new suit for the meeting, a dark green one that made me look professional, dignified. Not expensive, but elegant. The night before my 70th birthday, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake watching the water stain on my ceiling, thinking about the journey from that 22nd floor conference room where I'd been humiliated to this moment, where I would return and reveal the truth. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I showered in water that fluctuated between lukewarm and freezing. I dressed carefully. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman I barely recognized. She wasn't the destroyed widow from 3 months ago. She wasn't the invisible wife from 45 years of marriage. She was someone new. Someone strong. Someone ready. I arrived at Thomas Wright's office at 8:40 a.m. The building was older than Evans's exposed brick wooden window frames, a kind of solid permanence that glass towers could never achieve. Thomas's office was on the 3rd floor. His secretary, an older woman with kind eyes, greeted me with a genuine smile. "Mrs. Morgan, happy birthday. Mr. Wright is waiting for you." She led me down a hallway with wooden floors that creaked under our feet. Thomas's office was warm, filled with books, with a dark mahogany desk and worn leather chairs that looked like they'd been there for decades. Thomas stood when I entered. He was in his 70s with completely white hair, kind eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses, and a smile that radiated warmth. "Helen," he took my hands gently. "Happy birthday." "Thank you." "Sit. The others will be here soon, but before they arrive, I want to give you something." He handed me a thick envelope sealed with red wax, an old-fashioned touch that was very Arthur. "A letter. Arthur wrote it for you to read today before the meeting. Take your time." He left me alone. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside were several pages handwritten in Arthur's angular script. I would recognize that handwriting anywhere. I began to read, and with every word the last pieces of the puzzle fell into place. "My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, you survived. I knew you would. You're stronger than you ever gave yourself credit for, stronger than I deserved. These past months have been hell for you. I designed it that way. Not from hate, but from a love too great to let you live the rest of your life as my shadow. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I kept reading. You needed to break completely to rebuild yourself. I'm sorry it had to be this brutal, but you would never have let go otherwise. You would have clung to being Arthur's wife until it killed you, just like it nearly killed me. Our children became monsters. That's my fault, not yours. I gave them too much too easily. I taught them that money equals power, but I never taught them compassion, humility, or the value of hard work. I watched them grow into people I didn't recognize, people I didn't particularly like, and I did nothing to stop it. When I saw what they'd become, I knew I had to act. But I also knew I couldn't fix them. They have to fix themselves. The empire they inherited is real, but it's structured to teach them a lesson. All those debts, all those problems, those are consequences of decisions I made intentionally. I wanted them to feel pressure, to understand that money without wisdom is a curse that destroys from within. My hands shook as I turned the page. But you, my love, you deserve something different. That parallel empire in your name is completely yours. $42 million in properties, plus the $6 million in cash that's accumulated over the years. But that's not all. I stopped breathing. For the last 15 years, I've been investing in technology companies, international real estate, and venture capital funds under a shell corporation registered in Delaware. I kept it completely separate from Morgan Properties, completely hidden from everyone, even from Thomas, until 2 weeks ago. That corporation is worth approximately $68 million, and it's entirely in your name. $68 million. I had to set the letter down, my vision swimming. Adding it all together, the properties, the cash, the corporation, you own approximately $116 million. You're one of the wealthiest women in California, Helen, and nobody knows it. $116 million, while I'd been eating day-old bread and rationing blood pressure medication, while my children had kicked me out with $600 in contempt, while I'd sat in that terrible apartment wondering if I should just give up. Today in Thomas's office, the truth will be revealed in front of our children. They'll see your true power. They'll see that the man they thought forgot you actually gave you everything. But here's the most important part, my love. This money isn't for you to become like them. It's not for revenge or cruelty or teaching them a lesson. That's my job, and I'm doing it from the grave. This money is for you to rebuild your life on your terms. Travel to places you've only seen in magazines. Design buildings again. You were so talented, Helen, and you gave it all up for me. Chase the dreams you sacrificed. Be the woman you were before you met me, the woman you can still be. About our children, that decision is entirely yours. You can help them out of their debts, or you can let them learn the hard way. I won't judge you either way. I'm in no position to judge anyone anymore. I just want you to know that every decision I made, every moment of pain I caused you, was because I believed in you. In the woman you were before you became my wife. In the woman you can still be. Happy 70th birthday, my love. May these be the first of many years where you finally live for yourself. I'm sorry I couldn't give you this freedom while I was alive. I was too selfish, too dependent on having you in my shadow. But in death, I can finally give you what you deserved all along. Your own life. Yours always, Arthur. The tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink, just like they had on the first letter. But these weren't tears of sadness or confusion. They were tears of release, of understanding, of forgiveness. Arthur had given me everything. Not just money, he'd given me the chance to rediscover myself, to be strong, to be me again. I wiped my eyes carefully, refolded the letter, and placed it in my purse. The door opened. Thomas looked in. They've arrived? Are you ready? I stood up, straightening my spine, lifting my chin. I'm ready. The conference room felt different this time. Maybe it was me who was different. Brandon, Tori, and James sat on one side of the long mahogany table, their faces showing varying degrees of confusion and worry. Richard Evans sat beside them, his briefcase open, papers spread out like he was preparing for battle. They all looked up when I walked in, and I saw the shock register on their faces. I wasn't the broken woman from 3 months ago. I wasn't the desperate mother from their last meeting. I was someone else entirely, someone who walked with purpose, who met their eyes without flinching, who took her seat across from them with quiet confidence. Mom, Brandon started, but I held up a hand. Let's wait for Thomas to begin. My voice was steady, strong. It surprised even me. Thomas took his place at the head of the table, opening his briefcase with deliberate ceremonial movements. Each paper he placed on the polished wood landed with a sound like a gavel striking. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. His voice was professional formal. Today is Mrs. Helen Morgan's 70th birthday, and as per the specific instructions left by Arthur Morgan, the complete truth about his estate will be revealed today. Brandon leaned forward impatient. Is there more money? Something that can help us with the debts? Thomas looked at him with an expression that could have been pity or contempt or both. Oh yes, Brandon. There's much more money. He paused for effect. But it's not for you. The silence that followed was absolute. Thomas pushed the first set of documents toward the center of the table. For the last 15 years, Arthur Morgan built a second empire, a parallel empire that no one in this room except Helen and myself knew about. He let that sink in before continuing. $42 million in real estate properties registered completely in the name of Helen Louise Morgan. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Brandon's face went white. That's impossible. Dad would have told us. He would have included us. He didn't want to include you, Thomas interrupted coldly. In fact, he specifically excluded you. Here are the property records. He spread the documents across the table like cards in a poker game. Every building, every parcel of land, every investment, all in his wife's name. All legally hers. All generating income that's been accumulating for years. Tori grabbed one of the documents with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the pages, her face losing color with each line she read. This can't be legal. Dad wasn't mentally well. He was under stress. He wasn't thinking clearly. Arthur Morgan was evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists 1 month before his death. Thomas placed more papers down with clinical precision. All of them certified that he was in full command of his mental faculties. Every decision he made was deliberate, calculated, and completely legal. James sat with his face buried in his hands. He didn't even try to read the documents. I thought I saw his shoulders shaking slightly. But that's not all. Thomas continued, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. He pushed another thick folder forward. Arthur also established a shell corporation 15 years ago. Investments in technology, startups, international real estate, venture capital funds. That corporation is worth approximately $68 million. He paused, letting the number settle. Also registered completely in the name of Helen Louise Morgan. Air falling backward with a crash that echoed off the walls. This is insane. Dad can't do this. We're his children. And she is his wife of 45 years. Thomas's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. The woman who sacrificed her career. Did you know your mother was a brilliant architect, Brandon? She gave that up to raise you. The woman who sacrificed her dreams, her identity, everything so you 3 could have the life you had. Each word was a hammer blow. The woman you kicked out of her own home. The woman you let starve in a miserable apartment while you spent millions on unnecessary luxuries. The woman you abandoned when she needed you most. Brandon stood there shaking with rage, with helplessness, with the dawning realization that he'd lost. Tori was crying silently, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks in dark streams. We didn't know, she whispered. If we had known, you would have been different. I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. You would have treated me with respect if you knew I had money. You would have loved me only because it was convenient. She had no answer. None of them did. Richard Evans finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What's the total estate value? Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Adding the properties, the accumulated cash, and the shell corporation, Helen Morgan owns approximately $116 million. The number fell like a bomb. And unlike your estate, Thomas added with surgical precision, hers doesn't have a single dollar of debt. Every penny is clean, clear, and completely hers. The silence was devastating. All the arrogance evaporated. All the superiority dissolved. All the contempt reversed. They looked at me now with different eyes, not with love or respect earned through relationship, but with the fearful recognition that the balance of power had completely shifted. I knew. James's voice was so soft I almost missed it. But everyone heard. All heads turned toward him. What? Brandon's voice was sharp. James lifted his face from his hands. His eyes were red, his face blotchy from crying. I knew. Not everything, but some of it. What are you talking about? Tori demanded. James took a shaky breath. 6 months before Dad died, he called me to his office. Just me, not you two. He told me he was making changes to his estate planning. He said Mom deserved better than what we'd been giving her. Brandon's face turned purple. And you didn't tell us. He asked me not to. He didn't give me details, just said he was making sure Mom would be taken care of. He said, your mother has spent her entire life being invisible. I'm going to make sure she finally gets to be seen. James's voice cracked. He told me to watch how we treated her after he was gone. He said it would be a test, not for Mom, but for us, to see who we really were when we thought we'd won everything. The confession hung in the air. And you said nothing. Tori's voice was accusing. You just watched us kick her out, abandon her, humiliate her, and you said nothing. Because I knew we deserved it. James's voice rose. Don't you see we failed Tori? We failed the test. We showed Dad exactly what we'd become: greedy, selfish, cruel. And he was right. He turned to me, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. I'm sorry I was too much of a coward to do the right thing. I'm sorry for all of it. I looked at my youngest son, 35 years old, finally seeing clearly. His apology was different from the one he'd given before. That one had been convenient, desperate, self-serving. This one was real. I stood slowly, all eyes on me. For the first time in this meeting, for the first time in years, I was the one with power. Not borrowed power, not reflected glory from my husband's success. Mine. I walked around the table, my footsteps deliberate, my presence commanding. For 45 years, I began, my voice steady and clear. I became what you needed. I paused, letting each word land. The perfect wife who never complained. The sacrificial mother who always put you first. The invisible woman who existed only to make everyone else's life easier. Brandon opened his mouth to speak, but I silenced him with a look. When your father died, you discarded me like garbage. You humiliated me. You abandoned me. You taught me that 45 years of love and sacrifice meant absolutely nothing. Tori let out a sob, but I continued. Arthur gave me this fortune, but more importantly, he gave me the chance to see you without a mother's illusions. He gave me the chance to see you exactly as you are. I stopped walking, standing directly across from them. Greedy, cruel, selfish. Each word was a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that would never quite settle. Now I have a decision to make. The three of them tensed, knowing what was coming. You're in massive debt. You're on the verge of bankruptcy. You're facing legal action and financial ruin. Hope flickered in their eyes, pathetic, desperate hope. And I have more than enough money to save you. The hope brightened. But I'm not going to. The words fell like a guillotine blade. Tori let out a whimper. James closed his eyes. Brandon's hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. Not because I'm vengeful, I continued. Not because I want to see you suffer, but because your father was right. I moved closer to the table, placing my hands on the polished wood. You need to learn this lesson the hard way. You need to understand that money without values is a curse. You need to build something for yourselves for the first time in your lives. You need to learn what it means to work, to struggle, to earn. I walked to the door, then stopped and turned back one final time. If someday, not tomorrow, not next month, not next year, but someday in the future, when you've learned humility, when you understand the value of hard work and genuine compassion, when you can come to me as children who truly love their mother and not as beggars looking for money. I paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Then maybe, just maybe, we can rebuild what was broken. I opened the door. Until then, you're on your own, just like I was. I walked out of that conference room with my head held high, my shoulders back, my heart surprisingly light. Behind me, I heard the sounds of a world collapsing, muffled sobs, angry voices, the rustle of desperate people, grasping at documents that proved their downfall. But I kept walking. Thomas caught up with me in the hallway. He was smiling not with cruelty, but with pride. Arthur would be very proud of you. I know. And I did know. I could feel it like a warmth in my chest. Thank you, Thomas, for everything. The money will be fully accessible to you by tomorrow. All the accounts, all the properties, everything. What will you do first? I thought about it. I'm going to eat a meal that costs more than $5. Then I'm going to look at office spaces. Office spaces? I used to be an architect. I think it's time I remembered how to design buildings instead of just cleaning them. His smile widened. I think Arthur would like that very much. I left that building and stepped out into the Los Angeles sunshine. The city looked different now, full of possibility instead of just concrete and indifference. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations, Helen. The game is complete. You won. Now go live. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Arthur. But that was impossible. He was dead. Then I understood. Thomas. He'd programmed it, set it to send at this exact moment. One final message from my husband delivered from beyond the grave. I smiled through my tears and typed back, "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for setting me free. I love you." The message sat there for a moment, then message could not be delivered. Of course it couldn't. Arthur was gone, but his gift remained. I stood in front of a renovated building in downtown Los Angeles, looking up at the sign that had been installed that morning. Morgan Designs, Architecture and Urban Planning, my building, my firm. My dream resurrected after 45 years of dormancy. The space was perfect high ceilings, natural light pouring through tall windows, and open floor plan that encouraged collaboration. I'd hired 3 young architects fresh out of graduate school, paying them well above market rate, because I remembered what it was like to struggle. They were inside now, setting up their workstations, excited about their first projects. I'd taught them everything I could remember from my own training, surprised at how much had stayed with me through all those years of disuse. It turned out you never really forget how to dream. You just forget that you're allowed to. My phone rang. Thomas, how's the first day? Perfect. Terrifying. Perfect. He laughed. I have some news you should know. Your children filed for corporate bankruptcy yesterday. It's official. I'd known it was coming, but hearing it still caused a small pang. How are they? Brandon is working as a real estate agent. Not a director, not an executive. A regular agent showing condos to first-time buyers. Tori sold the mansion. She's living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Glendale and working as a design consultant. James went back to school to finish his architecture degree. James, my baby, the one who'd confessed, who'd shown real remorse. Thomas, can you do me a favor? Of course. Find out where James is going to school. Don't tell him it's from me, but set up a scholarship in Arthur's name. Full tuition, books, living expenses. He has to maintain a 3.5 GPA and complete community service hours, but if he does, it's his. Helen, I'm not saving him. I'm giving him a chance to save himself. There's a difference. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Arthur really did choose the right woman. After we hung up, I walked inside my new building. The architects looked up, smiling. Mrs. Morgan, we were just discussing the Civic Center project. Do you have a moment to review our initial concepts? Mrs. Morgan, Helen Morgan, not Arthur's wife, not Brandon and Tori and James's mother, just me. I have all the time in the world, I said. The knock on my office door came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing plans for a community center, a project I was doing pro bono for a neighborhood that reminded me of where Arthur had grown up when I heard it. Come in. The door opened slowly. James stood there wearing jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt, holding a portfolio case. His hair was longer than he used to wear it, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of long nights and hard work. Mom, just that one word, but it carried the weight of a year's worth of learning. James. We looked at each other for a long moment. I graduated, he said finally. Got my architecture degree. Finished with a 3.8 GPA. I heard, congratulations. His eyes widened slightly. You heard I didn't confirm or deny. What are you doing here, James? He took a deep breath. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But I was wondering, he lifted the portfolio, if you might be willing to look at my work, not because I'm your son, just as an architect reviewing another architect's portfolio. I studied him carefully. He'd lost weight like I had. His expensive watch was gone. His shoes were worn. He looked like someone who'd been through a fire and emerged changed. Are you looking for a job? I'm looking for a chance to prove myself, to show you that I learned something from all this, that I'm not the person I was. I stood up slowly, walked around my desk. James tensed, unsure. "We have an opening for a junior architect," I said. "The pay is competitive but not extravagant. The hours are long, the work is demanding, and you'll be judged on your merit, not your last name." Hope flickered in his eyes. Real hope, not the desperate grasping from a year ago. "But if you're serious about rebuilding not the company, not your trust fund, but yourself, then maybe we can work together." "I'm serious, Mom." His voice broke. "I want to rebuild. I want to be someone you can be proud of. Someone Dad would have been proud of." I looked at my youngest son, the one who'd confessed, who'd gone back to school, who'd done the work without knowing if there would be any reward at the end. "Then let's start," I said. I held out my hand for the portfolio. He gave it to me with trembling fingers. We sat down together, mother and son, architect, and began to review his work. Outside my window, the city stretched out in all directions, full of buildings, full of dreams, full of possibility. And for the first time in 70 years, I was living my own dream instead of serving someone else's. That evening, after James had left, after I'd offered him the position, after we'd cried together, after we'd begun the long process of rebuilding what had been broken, I sat alone in my office. Arthur's phone sat on my desk, the device that had started everything. I'd kept it as a reminder, a symbol of transformation. As I reached for it, the screen suddenly lit up on its own. My breath caught. One new message appeared, time-stamped to this exact moment. "Well done, my love. I always knew you could fly. I'm sorry it took me dying to give you wings, but I'm so proud of who you've become. You were never meant to be just my wife, just their mother. You were always meant to be Helen, brilliant, strong, complete on your own. The woman I fell in love with at 25 is the same woman reading this at 70. I just had to help you remember her. I love you. Always have. Always will." Tears streamed down my face as I stared at the screen. Thomas. It had to be Thomas with one final programmed message. But part of me, the part that had loved Arthur for 45 years, the part that understood him better than anyone, chose to believe it was really him. One last gift. One last moment of connection. I typed back through my tears. "I found her, Arthur. I found myself. Thank you for the cruelest kindness anyone ever gave me. Thank you for loving me enough to break me so I could rebuild stronger. I forgive you. I forgive myself. And I'm finally free." I pressed send, knowing it would go nowhere, knowing it didn't matter. The message had been received where it needed to go, straight to my heart. I stood up, turned off the lights in my office, and walked out into my new life. The phone stayed on my desk screen, dark once again, its purpose fulfilled. The Morgan Designs team was presenting our Civic Center design to the City Council when I saw them enter the public gallery. Brandon, Tori, and James. Brandon had changed, leaner, wearing an off-the-rack suit, his face showing lines that came from honest work rather than stress spending. Tori looked different too, less polished, more real, her designer clothes replaced with simple professional attire. James caught my eye and smiled. He'd been working for me for 6 months now, proving himself every single day. After the presentation, which the council approved unanimously, my children approached me in the hallway. "Mom," Brandon said, his voice uncertain. "That was incredible, really incredible. Thank you. We just wanted to—" Tori started, then stopped. "We wanted to say we're proud of you, and we're sorry it took us so long to see you." I looked at all three of them. Brandon working an honest job for the first time in his life. Tori learning to live within her means. James rebuilding our relationship one day at a time. "Would you like to get coffee?" I asked. "All of us, as a family." "We'd like that," Brandon said softly. "We'd like that very much." As we walked out of the building together, not as creditors and debtors, not as victims and villains, but as people who'd all been through fire and emerged, changed, I thought about Arthur. He'd given me everything, but the greatest gift wasn't the money. It was the gift of becoming myself again. Of remembering that I wasn't just a footnote in someone else's story. I was the author of my own.